The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
It's the Best Birth Podcast, where we interview experts that elevate you as you prepare your heart and mind to have the best birth.
Each episode will interview professionals so you are prepared for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Our experts will build your confidence and empower you to trust your intuition throughout your pregnancy.
This audio is taken from videos on YouTube. Watch the entire episodes on YouTube at Birth Made Mindful. You're listening to the Best Birth Podcast. Today, our guest is Sarah Felt, a midwife here to share all of the expertise on having our babies.
Sarah is the lead midwife and owner of Beautiful Mountain Birth. She's the proud mama to 7 amazing children, 6 heaven babies, and married to her sweetheart of 27 years. She's dedicated her life to strengthening families and empowering individuals. She loves gardening, although she says her thumb is more brown than green, nature and the outdoors, spending time with family and friends, and a clean house. Just don't stop by unannounced. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. We are excited to talk about our babies, our births, our bodies, kind of jumping right in. We've talked a lot about how mothers are checked at their prenatal visits, but I want to ask you a couple of questions about what you're checking for with our babies. So I remember going to a lot of appointments and using a Doppler or using an ultrasound to kind of monitor the baby's heart rate. What are you looking for while you're doing that test?
That's a really good question. So when I use a Doppler, I'm looking for multiple things. I'm looking not only for what is the heartbeat, what is the rate and the rhythm, but I'm also listening to the sound. Are the valves opening and closing well? Do I sense maybe mom needs some more omegas because the valves are having a hard time with that? So I'm looking for a couple of things. Is the baby giving me good accelerations? Are they showing that they're healthy? Is there a static line that the heart rate is just too stable? And I go, how's your diet today? How's your water today? Or is heart rate too high? If heart rate is too high, that can tell me, you might be telling me you're drinking water, but are you? And, things like that. So I'm looking for a lot of things.
Do you feel like you had to hone into that skill, or was that something that came really naturally as you started listening to so many babies?
No, it's something you have to learn and listen and practice for sure. Yeah.
Another check they do is the fundal height. I remember they always bring out the tape measure. What are they looking for with that?
Right. So we're looking for appropriate growth and growth rate. And we often joke in the midwifery community that we think midwives created the metric system because it's a centimeter of growth per week of pregnancy. Right? So that's a little backstory. But so we're looking for appropriate growth. And sometimes some women don't meet the typical standard, but their baby is progressing and is growing. But it's our job to kind of make sure is baby meeting that. For example, most women grow that centimeter per week of pregnancy, and that's great. That's kind of easy to assess. When we check that fundal height, we're also palpating baby in the position. I'm feeling for amniotic fluid levels. I'm feeling for baby's position. I'm feeling for anything that might be of concern. But I'm also looking and listening to the mom. And if she's told me in the past, hey, I've had a few babies that they induced me early because they were afraid my baby was too small, which is kind of funny, right? We don't want babies to be too big or too small, but really babies come in all sizes. It's just fine. And we've checked them with an ultrasound to follow up and make sure, and they're just fine. They're growing normally. We have small people in this universe. It's okay.
So if it's 1 centimeter per month, at what point do you start having concerns if they're not on track, or if maybe you're I've always heard people say, "Oh, I'm measuring big. I'm 2 weeks ahead in my measurements." What does that tell us about the health of the pregnancy or the health of the baby?
Right. So it can tell us several things. Babies are like normal humans. We have growth spurts. We have times where we're normal, and then as children, we just shoot up over a summer, and babies are a little bit the same inside the womb. So I'm looking for, is there a steady growth pattern? If I see a mom come in from one prenatal to the next and it's been 4 weeks and she hasn't had any growth, I'm going to ask more questions. I'm going to dig a little deeper, and I'm probably going to follow up with an ultrasound just to see what is going on with baby. Is baby safe? Is baby okay?
And is this the same for a fetal kick count?
Fetal kick count doesn't tell me growth, right? Fetal kick count tells me how is baby doing in the womb. And just like just like babies have personalities in real life, or humans do, right? Babies have personalities in the womb. So some kids are a little more mild, some kids a little more active. And so we look at that pattern as well. And that can change from, one child to the next child. So I look for kind of all of that. And the other thing we're watching for, babies actually develop a sleep and wake cycle around 32 weeks. And so sometimes I'll have a mom come in around 28 weeks and then 32 weeks, and they'll be like, I don't know, it's changed. The baby's changed. I'm like, that's normal. They're figuring out their cycle, and that's okay. And we look at, are they keeping that pattern, or are they changing who they are, right? Is there something that's out of the normal? And then we'll dig a little deeper.
So if you stop feeling your baby kick, or you stop feeling those movements, is there different levels of normal?
If they stop moving, let's find out why. So usually what we do when we're monitoring kick counts, it doesn't mean that I'm having you with a watch every hour going, okay, check 10, I can go about my business, right? I want to see, is that normal pattern followed? If it's not, let's drink some juice, let's drink some Gatorade, just something a little sugary. Yes, it's the one time I encourage sugar. And lay down and just feel. And usually baby will react and go, oh, whoa, that was a nice little sugar rush, and they'll get moving and everything's fine. If baby's not keeping that movement up and that kick count up, then we look at why, and let's go get some more information and dig a little deeper and make sure baby's okay.
And if they're not moving as they should, what could that be an indication of, or when should you worry?
Right. Oh gosh, that's like the biggest question, right? What could it be an indication of? Usually that baby's not doing well. There's like a million reasons it could be. Maybe the amniotic fluid has gone really low. We saw that a lot during COVID. The water just disappeared overnight sometimes. And we had to work hard with some of our mamas to replace that. It can mean that baby's got some kind of abnormality that we haven't detected yet and that we haven't found. And usually everything is caught around that 20-week ultrasound. But, it's not an exact microscope into the womb. So we do our best in science that we have.
I love that you spoke to patterns, because as your baby has a rhythm, it will be unique than if you compare it to someone else's. But I just remember being so worried that, oh, my baby's not moving. Are there some ways to reassure yourself? Like maybe your baby doesn't move as much and it's still okay, instead of just immediately jumping to, oh, something's wrong.
Right. I'd like to tell moms and dads, look at your personality, look at your husband. Most likely your child's going to follow along some of those similarities with your personality, right? And if that baby isn't moving as much, definitely try the kick count test with the sugar and laying down. But also look at, like, when was the last time you felt baby move? Are they just pay attention? Are they following a pattern of sleeping and waking, and just trying to be aware more of what you're doing? And then thinking too, what has you changed in your behavior, right? Sometimes we have a day where we're just chilling. We're chilling on the couch. Maybe, I don't know what we're doing. Maybe we're doing bills at the table, or we're working at a job and we're more sedentary. And baby's like, sweet, I've got freedom to go. But if you're standing up, what happens when baby's out in your arms and you're moving? Baby sways, goes to sleep and calms down. And it's the same thing when baby's in your tummy. They're just like, oh, thanks. And they kind of melt. So being aware of, what did you change?
I've always heard that as a baby gets bigger, they lose space, right? They don't have as much space. So is it normal as you're expanding and getting ready for delivery that a baby would have less room to move?
Yes, right? Less room to move, but is it impossible to move? No. We see babies do incredible things, even deep into the birth canal, doing full 360s. We're like, how did you even manage that? So babies can still move. They just get a little more creative.
So we should still be feeling all of that movement, into
Yes.
38, 39, and 40 weeks.
Right. And that movement might feel different than, at 32 weeks, it might feel like more punchy and stronger. Whereas when the baby has less room, so do you. So
That's what I was feeling, because I always remember, as I got, gigantic, it felt like I'm not feeling my baby, kick or move as much.
yeah, and that's fine. Yep.
As we get closer to delivery and labor, there are things like the non-stress test or just monitoring more heart rates. What are the purposes of these tests?
Right. Usually non-stress test is done. I haven't felt baby move. I feel like there's a change in their pattern. I'm concerned. And so they check to see, is baby under stress? And that's just having monitors hooked up to your belly along with a contraction monitor. And you have a little button and you get to click the button for every time the baby moves, and they watch for contraction pattern as well as the fetal heart tones that whole time and see how they're stable or how they're doing and how they're handling things. Sometimes non-stress test will also include an ultrasound follow-up. That is done more, I would say, in a hospital setting versus an out-of-hospital setting. With midwives out of hospital, we tend to do what we call a midwives non-stress test. Although we do have a non-stress test machine at my clinic and we do use it on occasion. But I find that if I can just play with baby on the belly and palpate, and I know baby's position and I know their pattern, we watch for, are they responding to my cues when we kind of mess with them on the belly and we rub their back or we kind of shift them a little bit. Does their heart rate go up and how long does it stay up? How well are they doing? So we kind of do a test that way with our Doppler in our hands.
The non-stress test is a funny name because it's supposed to be non-stress, but I always feel like a mother feels stressed when she realizes that she needs to have further monitoring for her baby. Of course, it's backwards because you're going in for the test to make sure that there's nothing wrong, to make sure that you don't need to take action based upon the health of your baby. But that's always such a funny name to me, non-stress test.
Right? I had a baby who stopped growing in utero, my fourth child. And we got to 32 weeks, and I'd been telling the team all along, there's something wrong with my baby. I can feel it. And I had placenta previa at the time. So they were monitoring the placenta previa, and every time they were also monitoring my son, and he would not meet the growth rate, and he would just shrink in that percentage. So he went from 90th percentile and then less and then less. And then finally at 30th percentile, they were like, I think there's something wrong with your baby. And I said, that's what I've been saying. And then at that point, I had 2 to 3 non-stress tests a week. And like you said, it was very stressful. I'm like, he was born at 36 weeks by emergency cesarean, but he was okay and he's doing fine. But it was definitely very stressful, right? It was put more stress on mom, which can put more stress on baby.
I had a non-stress test for my first. They said that there was not as much amniotic fluid. Do you know if there's any way to increase amniotic fluid, or does that just happen in the body according to what it does?
It is definitely, it's not completely in our control, but we definitely have a far larger influence than we're led to believe. And honestly, the easiest way to do that is electrolytes and water. So drink your coconut water. If you like liquid IV, go for that. If you like trace minerals, go for that. Go for something that's as natural as can be that will help replenish that amniotic fluid. The more dehydrated you are, the more dehydrated baby will be, and the less amniotic fluid you'll have. In the second and third trimester, we're actually replacing 1.5 liters of amniotic fluid every day. So if you think of your belly like a toilet bowl for baby, they're using that up. It's got to be flushed. It's got to be cleaned. And have you ever, left the tank that had that problem on the toilet? It's just continuously flushing and flushing. And if you don't have any intake coming into you, the baby's going to pull from your cells, the baby's going to dehydrate you, and then they're going to be like, the shelves are empty. I don't have anything.
How many hours would it take from the time that we intake more water until that actually kind of like makes a difference for the amniotic fluid?
That is a great question. Different moms, different results, right? I can think of a couple of my moms that really struggled with dehydration. One of these moms came in and her baby's heart rate was actually 180s, 190s, which is tachycardic. And we felt baby, we felt position, we could feel the stress. We gave her an electrolyte drink and had her drink it and then wait 20 minutes, and then we redid fetal heart tones, and instantly there was already an impact and an increase. So within 20 minutes, potentially, refilling that entire tank might take a little bit longer.
One thing I also didn't realize as well is that after your water breaks, you continue to add more amniotic fluid.
Yes.
Right? So if your water is broken, you're probably going to be leaking. And I just recommend wearing one of those Depends or, a diaper so that you're not worried about water getting everywhere or leaking down your leg, because you'll keep producing water until your baby's born.
Right. Whenever we have a mom whose water breaks, that's what we do. Like, please drink more, drink more, drink more.
Yeah, my water broke with my first, and we walked to the hospital, and I was leaking as I went. And yeah, it's just so fascinating. They can just tell, yes, that's amniotic fluid. Do you want to share a little bit more about your birth stories with your children?
Okay, well, gosh, where to start? So I have 7 children, so I have a few stories. I started out actually with my birth story. Let me preface this by saying my husband comes from a medical family, and I come from a little more medically minded family. And out of hospital birth was never an option, but I'd heard of natural birth, and so I was very interested. And that was something that piqued my interest. So I studied, I worked hard. I ended up not being able to get the birth that I wanted. I wasn't as prepared or educated as I thought I was. And my first birth was actually very difficult. I had an epidural. I pushed for 4.5 hours. They used forceps, they used vacuum, and she ended up with a traumatic brain injury from her birth. She's doing great today, but that was the short of hers. My second, I figured I was broken. I wasn't meant to have babies. So I had another epidural. And all of my babies, except for my C-section, all of my babies are posterior. All of my babies have meconium, and all of my babies need resuscitation. And all of my babies have shoulder dystocia and have to be extracted at some point. So that was my second and my third story. My fourth was the cesarean. My fifth, I was fed up. I was like, that's it. I cannot be broken. I saw this video, and if I could track it down, I totally would share it with the world. And it's been removed from the internet, I swear. But this woman, she was in France. Imagine like this beautiful white gown, like totally picturesque French movie, right? And she's laboring in this attic space. There's candles everywhere, no furniture, no nothing else. Her midwife is sitting against the wall. Her husband is sitting against the wall. And she's just moving as she feels those waves and those contractions. And there's just calm, gentle music playing in the background. And there's like a time lapse. You know, obviously her labor wasn't 4 minutes. But then suddenly she reaches down underneath this beautiful white gown and pulls up this baby and puts it skin to skin. And I was like, what? Are you telling me birth can be like that? I've been robbed. I've been robbed. And so I studied, I worked really hard, and I hired a doula for the hospital. And I had my first all-natural birth at the hospital. And then my 6th and my 7th I had at home. So that's the short version.
And you've probably seen a lot of births in your practice as well, where, you know, half of them are that gorgeous, you know, white flowy dress version, and then the other half are a different story.
Right. Yeah, my story never got to the white, beautiful dress. She just inspired me. My stories were, well, my last baby, let me put it this way. My last baby, we had 2 foreign exchange students living with us. So we had 8 children when I went into labor. Came out with 9, right? And when I went into labor, I said, I just don't want anybody around. Just send everybody to the basement. I didn't think at the time the basement was the TV was directly below my bedroom. And I'm not quiet. I'm a freight train. Mm-hmm. That loud birthing sound that some moms make, oh, I make it really good. And afterwards, I was like, I wonder if these poor exchange students, a girl from Germany and a girl from Spain, I'm like, oh my goodness, what are they going to think? And they came upstairs, and luckily the TV had been loud enough they didn't hear anything. But no, I was never the white dress peaceful birther. No.
Well, what are some ways to prepare for labor, you know, regardless of the experience you're going to have?
That is a really good question. I think first, educate yourself, right? Learn stories, and hear positive birth stories. We have plenty of fear out there. We've all had plenty of a dose of that. Go hear positive, inspiring stories. Let people tell you their victories in birth, whether they be at the hospital or they be at home or they be your great-grandmother's story or your neighbors. Find those positive ones to fill your heart and your mind with. And then look inside your soul for what work you need to do on your own. We often see in the natural birth world moms who don't go into labor. And why aren't they going into labor? Or, well, according to the 40-week, right, which we all know there's no due date. There's no assignment to turn in. You get a cute package at the end. But the question is, why? Like, what's going on emotionally with you? Do you have some concerns that are unresolved? Have you had birth trauma in your family that you might be holding on to generationally in your own body? I don't know if you guys have ever studied epigenetics, but that trauma is passed down through your cells. So do you have something to clear up and maybe write out or journal out or talk to a friend about or do birth art or birth work? So do some kind of a journey and discovery journey for yourself of where am I at emotionally? Where do I really sit with this process? And where are my feelings? And sometimes the issues that come up when I work with a client to go into labor, because we'll do foot zoning, we'll do things like that, we'll do acupressure, we'll do emotional processing for labor work. And sometimes the issues are really nothing related to birth, which always surprises the mom. I can think of one sweet mom, and her part of her concerns that were keeping her back were things that she dealt with when she was 12 and 13 years old with neighbors and with friends and with not being acknowledged for her gifts and her talents. And she felt like the black sheep in her community for going against the grain and doing a natural birth at home. And once she processed through that fear, I mean, she had the most beautiful delivery. It was beautiful. I can think of another mom, and her fear, like she was so excited, and we're working through all these things, and I'd bring them up as I would identify them on the feet, and then, which sounds really weird. Foot zoning is a whole nother podcast, ladies. But we got to this one issue, and I looked at her and I said, "Are you ready for your baby?" She's a first-time mom. "Are you ready for your baby to be mad at you?" And she lost it. She broke down hysterical, ugly crying. And she was like, my baby, no, I'm a good mom. I'm going to be a good mom. You are going to be an incredible mom. But your child gets to have feelings you can't control. And it was this huge aha for her and a transformational moment. And then she went into labor.
You speak a little bit about the environment of birth. Do you feel like that's also cultivated in the weeks prior to welcoming the baby?
Definitely in the weeks prior. I think it happens unknowingly throughout our pregnancy, and it happens with intent and accidentally, right? Definitely intentional creation helps to mold our environment. Whether or not we're there, it creates an environment where we can be there potentially. And so I think that's a great idea to do. And definitely the actions you take in the discussing and reading and studying throughout pregnancy, or even if you're not pregnant yet, sometimes we forget that time either in between babies or before you ever have your first child is just as powerful for a pregnancy and a delivery.
I want to ask all the questions when people say, like, can I naturally induce? What can I do to get this baby here faster?
This is a good question.
I think the answer is like, no, you're not going to be able to do anything to get this baby here faster. But do some of these things actually help? Like, does eating pineapple help? Does drinking raspberry leaf tea help?
Absolutely. They absolutely do. So we see a stark difference in our practice. We do a lot with nutrition. We do a lot with food. We do a lot with supplements and vitamins. And I see a difference between my moms who are like trying very hard and my moms who are learning and still trying hard, but maybe aren't at that same level of effort and involvement. Every effort, though, makes the difference and definitely helps. That red raspberry leaf tea strengthens the uterine muscle. The pineapple, the bromelain in the core, it's actually the core of the pineapple, that actually does help with labor and delivery. The eating dates actually does soften cervixes. So does putting in evening primrose oil. We don't take it internally. Evening primrose oil will actually thin your blood and can help, or not help, can increase your chances of hemorrhaging. So you do it vaginally to help soften your cervix that way. Evening primrose oil has prostaglandins in it. Semen has prostaglandins in it. All of that helps to soften the cervix and induce labor. So it definitely does. Definitely.
Are there any other things that I missed that could help to prepare your body for labor? Dr. Christopher's birth prep, is that something that is a good thing to take, or are there too many like back and forths on the efficacy or the safety of it?
I definitely recommend having some kind of a herbs. There is this misnomer that if you take Dr. Christopher's Birth Prep, or there's several different brands. There's a Sunstone brand, there's Deliver Ease from Good Earth, there's a couple of them. If you take that, then it will speed up your labor, or if you have a fast labor, it's going to make it go faster, and you don't want to drop a baby on the floor in 5 minutes, kind of an idea. And really what those herbs are doing, yes, they help the uterus to go into labor, but they're also nourishing the body and what the body is missing. And so we find that moms who have a prolonged labor, or moms that have a too fast labor, are often struggling with some nutritional deficiencies.
What are your top recommendations to avoid those nutritional deficiencies?
Gosh, that's a big one.
A huge one.
Top recommendations, really good, healthy diet. I know we can't beat it enough. Dr. Brewer, you may have heard of the Brewer's diet. Dr. Brewer studied this as an OB several years ago, created the Brewer's diet. You can look it up online, and there's additional really great resources for pregnancy and diet that are out there. But he talked about just simply changing protein in the diet and the significant decrease they saw in things like preeclampsia and other conditions for pregnancy that led to a healthier and easier delivery. So diet is huge. Yeah.
Avoiding sugars, avoiding processed foods, like what are your main things that you see that will cause someone to have the problems?
That's okay. So this is the best kept secret. And I say best kept because somebody kept it from me. And so all of my babies were very big. My largest baby was 9'11", and I know women have bigger and they're amazing. My smallest baby was my preemie, but he doesn't count. That's a different story. But my smallest was 8'4" after that for a full term. And I didn't find out until I became a midwife that if you eat more sugar and you eat more carbs that last trimester, it acts like sugar for the baby, and it does make your baby bigger. Mm-hmm. If I had focused on protein and good nutrition and less sugar and less carbs, I would have had a smaller baby. Yeah.
You talk about nutrition, and we've talked about it for the mother. What about in getting pregnant and the health of producing more sperm or things like that in order to increase pregnancy odds?
Right. That's a great one. Our diet right now, especially here in the States, there's a revolution. There's this underground revolution, so be a part of the revolution. But we're all looking at our diet and trying to stand up for ourselves more, and we're saying this isn't okay. These processed foods really aren't okay. These chemicals really aren't okay. We used to think xylitol was this amazing thing, and there's new research that just came out that said, nope, xylitol is also causing these problems in the body. So look at real foods. If you have to get a dictionary out to define what's on the label or Google it, you are off track, right? Let's find actual foods. The other thing that we're really missing significantly in our diet are fermented foods. We do not have a healthy gut, and everything in our health starts from the gut. So whether you do, yes, pickles are great in pregnancy. Drink that pickle juice if you crave it. But do pickled beets, pickled eggs, sourdough bread, natural yeast doughs. There's lots of ways to get really good fermented foods to help your gut, and start there. If you have a healthy gut, your liver is detoxing and doing better. Your gallbladder is doing better. Your pancreas is doing better, and that will just support that whole foundation of a good, healthy pregnancy. Look at what you're drinking. Are you drinking a lot of water? Are you drinking a lot of sodas? I can guarantee you if you have a Monster every day, your sperm count's going to be lower. It impacts it on a very, very real level.
Oh, this is so important, our nutrition, our health. Let's talk a little bit about exercise. How does exercise in like the last weeks getting ready for labor help to have a smoother delivery?
That's a great question. I like to see moms keep up on what they were doing before pregnancy. You may have heard of the mom here who, I think she was like 8 months pregnant or 9 months pregnant, and she ran like the fastest mile, like totally inspirational, right? I am not a runner, so I really looked up to her. I do different kinds of exercise for myself, but what you start before, continue. Some women get to that first trimester where they feel terrible And that's a different topic as well. There are things you can do so you don't have to feel as terrible. Doctors will tell you morning sickness is normal. A degree of morning sickness is normal, but most of it can be treated, managed, and helped with nutrition. But after you get through that slump of tired and a nauseousness and maybe some emesis and vomiting, get back into something, whether that's walking every day, whether it's, okay, we have a joke in our practice. I can't do anything. I've got 3 kids. I can't get out of the house except to the mailbox. And we get half a block down before one kid is either wet their pants or throwing a fit, right? And so we say, do you have stairs in your house? So go up and down the stairs. You have something to get in the basement, go down the stairs, go up the stairs, go down to the basement and get it. So put in little things throughout the day. They don't have to be a workout session.
And I remember the advice you gave me was to climb the stairs sideways, as if I was like a football player. So if I couldn't get out to do the curb walking on a real curb with all those other kids in tow, that I could just walk up the stairs like a crab.
Yeah. There's hacks, ladies. We just got to get creative. And I know everyone can do it because we're moms.
Absolutely. What about squatting? Should we hang out in a squat position for a couple of minutes every day?
So squatting is great, but let's also look if you've got hip issues or hip dysplasia, or you've got loose hips because you're struggling with connective joint tissue disorder. Sorry. You have to look at what can you do. So squats are great. Lunges are great. Hip circles, getting on that ball and really working that hip mobility. Don't jump on the trampoline though. Oh my goodness. I had a mama jump on the trampoline. Don't jump on the trampoline. That's soft, bounce. That's one thing, but don't jump.
And is that for just the weeks leading up to it? Is that all of pregnancy?
I recommend anything after 12 weeks because that baby's head can pound against that pelvic bone. And you don't want a head injury before birth. So,
Yeah. We've talked a lot about nourishing the body through exercise and nutrition. What about nourishing the mind? How can we prepare our mind for birth? We know it's a big mental game.
Right. Positive self-talk and affirmations. You did affirmations,
Yeah.
right? I remember that.
They're around here somewhere. We'll link to the affirmations, and I would just say them out loud too, sometimes to make myself believe them. I am strong. All of the women are birthing with me. It's you don't want to always be feeling that positive when you're in pain during labor, but I would try to say them ahead of time so that I could remind myself why I was doing the work to have an unmedicated labor.
Yeah, I love it. And sometimes if you don't have the time to maybe make something pretty, I've had moms say, oh, well, but I saw these beautiful ones that Sarah did, or I saw the thing on Pinterest. I'm like, get out a 3x5 card or take a piece of newspaper, your kid's scrap paper. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you're taking an idea and a thought and you're forming it into reality by putting it on paper. And I've had moms come with their 3x5 cards and literally just stick them up all over the birth center so they see them. And I've had moms who wrote them out on a list. We had one sweet mom, she was so sweet and so tender. And she was very nervous about her birth. This was her second child, first out of hospital. And she was kind of just frozen. She wasn't going into labor. So we sat down with her and her husband and we made an affirmation list on a piece of paper. And this sweet gal, one of hers was, I'm a bad A. And I was surprised. But that's what she needed to hear was, she could do this. And in labor, he took that list and he read it to her again and again. And he'd pull one out as he felt needed in that moment. And when she started to get discouraged and he read her an affirmation or we repeated one of those affirmations, she would just yes, I can. And she would be so encouraged. So definitely good mental moment, or stand in front of the mirror and say your affirmations. Hang them up in your house, whatever you need to do to get in that positive game. Some women will record it and then play it to themselves as they're sleeping. That's an easy thing to do. Listen to somebody else's. There's so many amazing ones on YouTube. You can pick your accent. You can pick your gender voice reading to you. And you can get some really good ones.
Yeah, our mind is so powerful with all of this and just the empowerment that can come and the inspiration. What about these mental exercises for when things don't go as planned, or when we maybe have a loss of a baby?
That is a really good one. Oh, when things don't go as planned. I think it's important, even when we prepare in prenatals with our mommies, we talk about preparing for the unexpected allows you to go there safely in labor. So it's not a taboo topic we don't talk about. It's something we prepare for ahead of time and say, all right, if this were to happen, how am I going to handle it in that moment? Knowing that I am safe and the best care is going to be given to me and to my baby. And with loss, having gone through loss, I've lost 6 babies, and those were very difficult challenges. One of my babies I lost just before the pandemic hit, and we had a family Halloween party, so a couple months before, I should say. We were going up for the family party, and I had decided to surprise my husband and not tell him I was pregnant, because I usually can't keep it a secret, but I was at 15 weeks and I had kept it a secret. And I usually can't keep it a secret because I have hyperemesis and I'm vomiting every day from 6 weeks on. And I woke up that morning of this family party and I was miscarrying. And I lost it. I was bawling, I was crying. And my poor confused husband's like, what just happened? And it took me like an hour to get the courage to tell him. And he had to go through his own mourning process. Like, you didn't even tell me you were pregnant. And I was like, I was going to surprise you. Like, it was going to be this great thing. And we went to that family party and I couldn't even handle, like, I got in the front door. I had managed to compose myself. I got in the front door. I saw my family and I lost it again. And my poor mom and my brother and all my family was like, what is going on? And I just went to the basement, curled up on a blanket on my brother's couch, and I let myself mourn. I let myself cry. And I knew that my family would take care of my kids and my husband would be fine. And I just let myself process. So giving yourself a safe space to process. It's okay. It's okay to mourn that loss. That was a real little one that you had. And that connection will be there forever.
Being able to remember them forever and hold that treasure in your heart is so important, not just trying to forget about it or feel like it wasn't important or it didn't matter because maybe you were only 8 weeks along or 9 weeks along, but each time to recall with fondness and to remember.
Right. I think grief is harder when we don't talk about it. And grief is harder when we don't share it. And it's okay. I had somebody tell me once, well, I can only help somebody if I've been through it. And I don't agree. I totally disagree. I am never going to go through everything you are. But I love you and I see you and I can walk beside you. I can cry with you even though it wasn't my experience. And that's really all we got to do for each other is sit down and say, you know what? I see you. You're having a hard day. What happened? And just listen. Just listen. Just let that person cry on your shoulder. And if their house is a mess and a wreck for the day, go over without judgment and either sit with them if that's what they want, or maybe do the dishes for them if that's what they want. But get to know your friend or your community, or if it's you, be willing to speak up and to ask. And it took me until my last miscarriage to speak up. My other ones I kept. As you can see, it still makes me tender. I kept because I didn't feel understood. I didn't feel heard. And it wasn't until my last baby I was like, no, this is something. This impacts all of my children. My youngest was very devastated. He'd waited 8 years for a little one. And it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
Those are such great reminders and things to do when someone else is going through a loss. Are there any other phrases we could say or things that were helpful for you as you've spoken up about it? I know that sometimes we hear, oh, I can't imagine, or I don't know what you're going through. Are there other phrases that are more helpful?
What can I do to help? Or how can I help? Sometimes we may not take that invitation, but knowing that somebody was willing is always nice. Sometimes the most meaningful things were the friends that dropped by with unexpected gifts, like a flower or a meal, or hey, can your kids come and play? Or hey, let's go out and do something. Those things were meaningful. We don't have to necessarily focus on the grief all the time to be heard and to be valued.
Sarah, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing the most tender parts of yourself. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add to our listeners, how they can prepare their hearts and minds for pregnancy and birth?
Be open. Be open. And don't be hard on yourself if you've had a rough past journey, right? My first birth, it took me till a year ago to gain a new perspective and to forgive the doctor. I finally realized just last year that had he not delivered my baby that way, I don't know that I would have had my 7 kids. I would have had a cesarean, and I don't know that I would have been able to have as many more as I did. And it gave me a new perspective. So healing is a journey, and past birth difficulties are a journey, and all of the lessons I've learned from each of my birth have made me who I am. They've made me the mother I am, and they've made me the midwife I am. And it's okay that it's a walk that takes time.
Beautiful. Our Mom Squad secret for this week is by Geeter. And it says, labor as long as possible at home. Eat during labor, and remember, you aren't stalled. Your body and baby may just need a break. Birth can last for days. Good reminder that we don't always know the timeline.
Very true. I love it.
Sarah, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. We hope you've been elevated and inspired by this week's expert.
Subscribe today so you never miss an episode. And please share our podcast or post on your social media so that other moms and dads-to-be can also have the best birth.
Please note that the information provided is based on the expert's insights and personal experience. It is not intended as medical guidance. Please seek the advice of your medical provider as it applies to your specific condition.